Hi everyone, and in today's video we're going to take a look at the RAmarl. Hi guys, and in today's video we're going to continue the series of class guides for people who have either come back to PSO or maybe picking it up for the first time. Today's video, as you may have guessed, is focusing on the RAmarl. So what we'll do is we'll break down the character and we'll go through the advantages and the disadvantages of the class. I'll cover some recommended gear for different stages of the game. And I'll also cover what kind of party role RAmarl has. So, first of all, what we'll do is we'll break down the character name as we normally do. So, RAmarl is basically a human female ranger. So the Ra stands for ranger, and then marl is the suffix that PSO uses to denote a female human. So it's essentially the female counterpart to the RAmarl that we've already done a video on. So, what RAmarl is, as the name suggests, is a female human ranger. Stat layout. If you start at level 1. So at level 1, a RAmarl starts out with 29 HP. So at 29 HP, which is, that's actually tied for the least of the rangers. So she actually starts with the same HP as RAmarl. TP also starts at 20. Which is the lowest of any class that can use TP in the game to begin with. Our attack power starts at 23, which again is fairly low. We start with 18 defense, which is middle of the road for a ranger. 20 mental strength, which is, of the classes that can use techniques, 20 is the lowest of all of those to begin with. Mental strength growth is actually pretty decent overall. We start with 72 accuracy, so ATA, which is actually the lowest of all of the ranges to begin with. And our evade starts at 36, which is quite high. So what you can see by looking at the level 1 stats that I mentioned there is that RAmarl is quite balanced. It's got a few areas where it's reasonably high compared to the other ranges and a few areas where it's a bit lower. But it doesn't particularly stand out in one area in particular. Which is in contrast to the RAmarl that we've already covered, which had an obvious bias towards accuracy. So if we then take level 200 into consideration, and this is level 200 without any materials, without any mags, our HP will go to 1315, which is the lowest of all of the ranges. It's actually the lowest by quite a significant margin as well. So RAmarl has 1315. The next lowest is RAmarl at 1520. Then we go to Seal, which has 1,890. So it's a big jump to the androids. And then Cast leads the pack with 1,964, which is actually the highest in the game. If we then go to TP, so our TP ends up at 931, which is the highest of all of the ranges. And again, you're only comparing it to RAmarl anyway, but it's significantly higher than RAmarl at 704. Our attack power goes to 743. Which is again the lowest of all the ranges. There isn't too much of a difference, so the next lowest after that is Seal at 775. So there's not a huge difference in between the attack power. Our defense goes to 426, which is kind of average. Mental strength goes to 732, which again is the highest of all the ranges. Our accuracy goes to 216, which is towards the upper end, so it's a little bit behind RAmarl at 230, but it is higher than both of the androids. And our evade goes to 798, which is the highest of all the ranges. And it's actually the highest of any class in the game. If we then factor in maximum stats, so with all materials and mags and everything, our HP goes to 1565, which is, again, quite a bit lower than the other ranges. The next lowest being RAmarl at 1770. Our TP goes to 1480, which is pretty high. Attack power maxes at 1145, which, although it is the lowest of the ranges, it's not too far behind Seal. And it's actually not too far behind Huniwell. For defense, we go to 577, which is, again, kind of average. Mental strength caps at just over 1,000, so it's 1,031. which again is far, far higher than RAmarl. Our accuracy cap's at 241. So 241 is actually not too far behind RAmarl, which has the highest in the game. So our accuracy is really, really high. So we go to 241 max. And our evade actually caps at 900, which is huge. That is the highest in the game. It even beats classes like For New World and Huxil. So as you can see, RAmarl, although she is quite a balanced class, at higher levels there is a slight bias towards the mental strength, the accuracy, and the evade. Whereas our HP and our attack power are quite low. So that's a rough breakdown of all the stats. Next we move on to techniques. So just for full disclosure, this character that I'm on at the moment, this is using Athenia's sandbox server. So this character basically is created at level 200. So that's why her experience is higher than it should be as well. So just bear that in mind. It's just so I can showcase some gear later on. If we go to our techniques, so for RAmarl, you have basically the same as Hugh Newell. So you have all of the simple techs, Foy, Zonde, and Barter up to level 20. You have Gifoy, Gizonde, and Gibata up to level 20. You have Rafoy, Razonde, and Rabarta up to level 20. You don't get access to grants and you don't get access to Megid. For healing techs, we get Resta up to level 20. We get Anti up to level 7, but we don't get Reverser. And for support, we get Shifter, Diband, Jelen, and Zalo all up to level 20. And we also get Ryuka to make telepipes. So it's exactly the same as Hugh Newell. Now, as you can probably tell, I mentioned this in the Hugh Newell guide, but this makes RAmarl a fantastic solo class because it's very, very self-sufficient. It's probably even better than Hugh Newell as a solo class just because you have the advantage of range as well. So that's our technique spread anywhere. So next thing we look at is if we look at some gear that you might want to recommend if you're looking at a RAmarl. So early on, the first thing you want to focus on is your mag, like any other character. With a RAmarl, you can probably get away with a standard power mag. So again, on this character here, I've got this Sato, which has 5 defense, 145 power, 50 dex, no mind. This will honestly do you absolutely fine. Early on, you kind of need more attack power than dex with RAmarl because you've got really high accuracy anyway. Your accuracy growth is really decent, so you'll meet the requirements to equip a lot of the range gear pretty easily. But what you'll find is that your attack power is quite low, so helping that with your mag by boosting the attack power in your mag will help you quite a bit. Later on, you can go for a different build if you want to. So later on, what you'll find is, and I think it's actually the case on this character. Yeah, so you can see here that our accuracies, our ATA is already capped. That's why it's in yellow. So because of that, if we just de-equip our mag now, you can see it goes down to that 216 that I mentioned. So that means there isn't much of a gap between that 216 and 241. So because of that, you probably don't need to have 200 and you probably don't need to have a 50 dex mag later on. You could probably drop that and then focus a little bit more on a bit more power or a little bit of mind if you want to go that route. But for the majority of gameplay, your typical power mag of 5145 50 will do absolutely fine. In regards to photon blasts, so I would probably again just recommend the usual 3. So Estella, Pillar, and Mala and Eula. You'll use Estella and Pillar for your attacks, and Mala and Eula solo, it won't be a massive help to you because you have that level 20 shifter and demand anywhere, and Mala Eula solo provides 21, which is not a huge difference. It's actually a bit of an inconvenience sometimes because you can't extend it with your own shifter and deband, so it will just run out on you. So you might be in the middle of a room and your shifter and deband will just run out. So sometimes it can actually be a little bit of a hindrance or a little bit of an annoyance. But you still want to bring Mala and Eula, particularly for party player. So in parties, you might have people who don't have Mala and Eula on the mag, and by bringing it along yourself, it allows you to do that photon blast chain and get that really, really high level shifter and deband up to level, I believe it's up to level 81 with 4 players. So I would just personally recommend the normal, like the typical 3 that most people go with. The advantage of it with Ranger as well is that it's much easier to do because your standard mag at level 10 will change into Kalki, and Kalki learns Estella anywhere. so you don't even have to swap it to another character. So that's what I'd recommend for Mag. In regards to gear, so early game, there are a few weapons that are probably worth looking at. So any kind of mech guns will do you really, really well. Mech guns are incredibly useful at all stages of the game. There is a really common mech gun called the MNA60 Vice, and that is a mech gun that drops an absolute ton on Purple Num. A couple of other IDs as well. And it's basically a mech gun that has a Berserk special. If you can get one of those, particularly if you can get lucky and get one with hit, that will honestly do you for a lot of the game. With Berserk, it's not too bad on RAmarl because you've got that high mental strength to just use rest and recover easily. You can also, if you want to, go with Spirit Weapons as well, and use your TP to do the damage instead. Or if you want to just go the normal route, you could also use Charge Mech Guns, so something like Charge Vulcans, for example. Once you get past that, other gear I'd recommend, so for defensive gear we'll cover first. So for shields, personally I would go with Ranger Wall. So Ranger Wall, it gives you reasonable fire, ice and thunder resists. Main reason that you use this is because, as you can see, as well as giving us the defense and evade increase, we also actually get a boost to our ATA from this, and it's a built-in boost to your ATA. So if we equip this, you can see our ATA will go from 241 to 261. That is a fantastic bit of gear, particularly early on, because you only need to be level 41 to equip it as well. The way you get this, if you don't know, is go into the Gallon Shop quest, and you basically just want to play the games in Gallon Shop over and over and over again until you get, I believe it's somewhere around 300 Gallon points, 300, 310 around there. Once you've got that many, you'll be able to exchange for the Ranger Wall. So I would definitely recommend this. Later on, and I mean really, really later on, you may want to swap this out for something like a Red Ring. But again, that'll be like level 180 plus and is an end game hunt. For the majority of the game, honestly, a Ranger Wall will do you absolutely fine. For our defensive armor or frames, the main ones I would recommend is you could go with something like Stealth Suit. So Stealth Suit, as you can see, gives you next to no defense at all. However, it gives you a huge boost to your evade. And it's level 120 requirement, which is not too bad. So this is mainly just to boost your evade through the roof. Obviously, with RAmarl, you've already got a huge reserve of evade anyway. So by boosting it that high, just a lot of enemies are just not going to be able to hit you very easily. There are disadvantages to having really high evade, though. So if you get blocked in by some enemies and you get stuck between them, you'll just block continuously and you just won't be able to do anything because you'll get locked in that animation of blocking. So just be aware of that if you are building a high evade character. Just make sure that you watch your positioning and make sure that you don't get hemmed in by enemies because it will just screw you over completely. So Stealth Suit is one I'd recommend. The other really cool thing about Stealth Suit as well is that when you equip it, your character does fade out. So you do feel like Solid Snake. You can see that when you move, you do actually phase back in slightly, but you're still a little bit transparent. But as soon as you go still again, your character just fades out. It's a really, really cool bit of gear, that. That's one I definitely recommend. Another one you can go with is the Brightness Circle. So Brightness Circle is a really solid armor. It has, pretty reasonable defense and evade. Obviously, it's a lot less than the Stealth Suit for evade, but it's still perfectly acceptable. It's level 111 to equip it, so it's not overly high. The main reason you want to bring Brightness Circle is because it's one of the better armors to use for Dark Resist. It's also pretty good for Light Resist as well. Obviously, when you get into Ultimate, there is a lot of things that use Dark attacks, like Megid, so quite often building a Dark Resist up is useful. So I would definitely recommend armors like Brightness Circle. Another really easy one to get, I don't actually have it on here at the moment, but is if you go Green Hill, there is a really, really easy drop for the Guard Wave armor. So Guard Wave is a 1 in 2 drop from the Green Hill Palrapi in Forest. And Guard Wave is a perfectly good armor. It's not one of the best in the game or anything, but it's a perfectly solid armor that you can get really early in Ultimate. It's probably worth hunting if you do go Green Hill. So that's for some defensive gear. So what I'll do is I will equip the Brightness Circle just so you can actually see what it looks like. You get a nice little visual effect with it as well. So for units, a few options. So I would definitely go for something like a V101. Until you find that, you could probably go for a Heavenly Battle. So Heavenly Battle, as I've mentioned before, boosts your attack speed by 40%. Really, really nice. Just lets you get your attacks off faster. V101 will give you that same attack speed boost, but will also give you a big boost to all your stats as well. It's an incredible unit. It's one of the best units in the game. So I would definitely recommend going for a V101. Next up, we have V502. So these as well, I should note that these are both Blue Burst exclusive items, as is the Stealth Suit. Brightness Circle is available on all platforms though. So V502, what this does is, while it's equipped, it will boost the success rate of certain special attacks. So attacks that do effects such as paralysis or freeze will get boosted effectiveness from this. Obviously, one of the disadvantages of playing RAmarl is that, I talked about this a little bit on the HughCast video, but androids have an innate boost to the success of paralysis, confuse, and freeze specials in Ultimate. RAmarl obviously doesn't get that. So anything you can use to boost your effectiveness with those specials will always be useful for you. So V502 can be a really, really useful unit for RAmarl, particularly if you're using items like Spread Needle, which I'll go on to. Aside from this, yeah, any other units should work fine, really. Quite often you will find that people will stack V101s for the stat boosters, for the stat boosts, but really any heavenly units, heavenly arms, anything like that will do fine. You may not even need the heavenly arms later game because your accuracy gets so high anyway, but these two I would definitely recommend. In regards to actual weapons, so I've got a few here. So first one should go without saying, Frozen Shooter. So Frozen Shooter is a rifle. Most of the IDs that get it from Hildator in Forest. So it's 1 out of 2 drops, so it's a pretty easy drop for the IDs that get it. It's a 10-star rifle. It's not particularly strong, but the main reason you use it is for the special attack, which is you can see here that every time I use a special attack, it freezes. Now, there is another weapon very similar to this as well, which is the Snow Queen. And the Snow Queen you get by, you take a Frozen Shooter, and you go to the Gallon shop, to the Photon Drop shop that Paganini runs, and you want to get a Photon Booster with your Photon Drops, and then use the Photon Booster on your Frozen Shooter, and that'll turn it into a Snow Queen. Now, differences between the two. So Frozen Shooter can combo, or a Snow Queen can't. So that's one issue with Snow Queen, is that the way the accuracy works in PSO is that your first hit is always your least accurate. So your accuracy actually improves as your combo goes on. So because of that, having a weapon that can combo means that if your accuracy is struggling a little bit, you can basically go light, special. Yeah, so if you use a Frozen Shooter, the advantage is that you can basically go light, special, like that. Whereas you can't do that with the Snow Queen because you can't combo. The advantage of the Snow Queen, though, is it can actually freeze multiple enemies at once. Let's see if I can do it. So I'll just try and get these grouped up a little bit. Doesn't help one shooting at the back. But you can see there's 2 frozen there. There you go. So with the Snow Queen, we freeze them all at once. But the disadvantage is that you can't combo, so if you do miss, then obviously you're going to get hit. So both these definitely have their own situations where they work better. I would say that in the majority of situations, the Frozen Shooter is more reliable. But if you do get enemies that are clumping up, you can go and use the Snow Queen as well. Next up is the Spread Needle. So Spread Needle is a fantastic crowd control weapon for rangers and is pretty much a staple weapon of any ranger. So the reason for it is it uses a rifle animation, but you can see it fires in a spread of needles, hence the name. Now, it is quite short range, and it isn't particularly strong either. The main advantage of this weapon, though, is the special attack, which is the paralysis. So let's see if I can do it. I may not be able to paralyze these, actually, because with them being machines, but basically the Spread Needle special is Seize, which is the paralysis special. And because you can shoot it at rifle speed, and you've got that area coverage, it allows you to just lock down certain spawns. So Spread Needle is a fantastic weapon that I would definitely recommend going for. Typically, with any range, you're going to want to hunt a frozen shooter and a Spread Needle. And then to round out the trifecta, for single enemy targets, you probably want to go with some kind of Mech Gun. So there's a few options you could use. You could use Charged Vulcans, or you could go with something like the Yasminkov 9000M. There are other options like Rage Diffuse as well in Blue Burst, but the Yasminkov 9000M is a really solid Mech Gun. Doesn't have a special attack, but it has longer range than normal. I believe I think it has rifle range. It also just looks cool. So I would definitely go for one of these as well. Other options you've got. So in Blue Burst, you could also go for a Heaven Striker. So Heaven Striker is a handgun. And its special attack depends on a few different things. So I covered this in the RAmarl video, but just to go over it very quickly. If you're just using Heaven Striker, its special attack will always be Berserk. So you sacrifice HP to do loads of damage. You can see, hit 700 damage there. If you use a Striker unit mag though, and the internet time at the bottom right of the screen starts with an even number, then it will change the special to Divine Punishment instead. So that's the Heaven Striker. It's the strongest handgun in the game, and is definitely worth going for. It just allows you to just blow through enemies. And particularly if you do use it with the Striker unit as well. So I would definitely recommend going for a Striker unit mag potentially as well. The only downside of Striker unit is it is incredibly ugly. And it's massive, so it blocks the view of most of your character. So, other options. We also have things like the Cannon Rouge. So Cannon Rouge is a bazooka. Can't combo, but you can see it makes a huge explosion. This is fantastic for enemies that have multiple targets. So in particular, bosses like the Dragon. This weapon will absolutely waste things like the Dragon, because it'll hit multiple targets and it'll do stupid damage every time you shoot. The only downside with it is that you can't combo with it. This is another option you can go for. This is the Cannon Rouge. And again, that's Blue Burst only. Another option for Blue Burst players is Excalibur. So again, you get this by getting a Lame d'Argent and then unsealing it. This is one of the strongest weapons in the game. Has a Berserk special and hits 3 targets. It is obscenely busted. Most classes can use this providing they meet the attack power requirement. You see there, we did like 847 damage there. And we're not a particularly high attack power class, and that was also without shifter as well. But it's a very strong weapon. Now you might be thinking, well, why would you use a melee weapon on a ranger? There are certain situations where it's actually viable to do it. So certain bosses you might be able to kill faster with a melee weapon like Excalibur. But in episode 4 in particular, the satellite lizards and the Yowies, if you try hitting them with guns from a certain angle, they'll actually phase out and you won't be able to target them. So what a lot of rangers will do is they'll bring a melee weapon with them. There's a few ways of doing it, so you can either go with a weapon like this, Excalibur. This obviously does really high damage, Berserk special, and hits 3 targets. You can also take, another common one is the name of it will depend on what server you're playing on, so it'll either be called the Principal's Gift Parasol or the Tyrell's Parasol. And that is basically a Parasol weapon that is a partisan, so it can hit multiple targets. And it also, I believe it boosts the range of your shifter and D-band. I may be wrong on that though. But that's a really nice support weapon as well. Other options. If you want to play challenge mode, you could go with a needle. So the S-rank needle looks like the Spread Needle, and it shoots in the same way, same animation and everything. Obviously with S-rank weapons you can choose the special. So you could go with this one, so this one for example is, I believe this is a Berserk needle. So downside is obviously you are going to have to heal yourself a lot using it, but again, I'm not using shifter here, so that's why the damage isn't as high as it could be. That's one option. Alternatively, you can also go with something like a Demon's weapon. So Demons cuts enemy HP, and on human and human characters, it cuts HP by 75%. So this is great for enemies that have high HP, so things like Baranzers or mini-bosses like Epsilon. See, every time that seal comes up, that is the demons taking effect. And again, using gear like V502 will boost the effectiveness of certain specials as well, so just bear that in mind. So I would definitely recommend going with some kind of S rank weapon. Particularly for RAmarl, I would probably recommend going with the needle. So that's a basic overview of some of the gear I would definitely recommend. So where does RAmarl actually shine and what is disadvantages? So as I've covered previously, one of the main advantages of RAmarl is that it's a very, very versatile class, which makes it fantastic for solo play. Similar to the Hugh Newer, you have that full suite of level 20 attack and support techniques, which means you can buff yourself and your party, you can debuff enemies, you've got a decent spread of attack techniques for inflicting statuses if you need to do it that way. You also, obviously, because you have things like rest and anti at a higher level, you can also support yourself really, really well. Makes them a very survivable class solo. RAmarl even more so than Hugh Newer because you also have access to weapons with incredible support like the frozen shooter and the spread needle. So by using these in conjunction with all of your support techniques and everything, you can make the game much easier. Also, RAmarl is also good as providing a backup support role. So in multiplayer, if you don't have a force in the party, having either a Hugh Newer or a RAmarl in the party is really useful because they can obviously provide that limited support to you. Yes, it's not going to be as good as if a force was in the party, but in the absence of a force, a Hugh Newer or a RAmarl can do a perfectly good job of supporting the team. The disadvantages of RAmarl. So, actually, there is one more advantage, that I should mention. So, certain weapons with RAmarl actually have different animations. The main one of note for RAmarl is the handgun animation. But normally, a character with a handgun will hold the handgun with two hands and they'll fire it in front of them. It's not a particularly long animation, but with RAmarl, we actually have this unique animation where you hold it sideways. And this is actually faster than the regular animation, which makes RAmarl extremely good with handguns. And because Heaven Striker is one of the best range weapons in the game and is a handgun, this makes RAmarl incredibly good with Heaven Striker. If you think you've got a faster animation, that means you can bring out Divine Punishment or Berserk faster as well. So that is a fantastic thing with RAmarl, that you have this unique animation. So disadvantages of RAmarl. If you do have a force in your party, then pretty much any other range will work better. So if you've got good support from a force, then the level 20 support from RAmarl isn't really needed. It's the same problem that Hugh Newer has as well. You just feel a bit outclassed because if you need a class that has highest accuracy, RAmarl will outclass RAmarl there. If you're wanting crowd control, then the Android Rangers honestly are probably better at it because they've got access to traps as well as having that boost to freeze and paralysis. So in a party, I would say that RAmarl is probably outclassed particularly by Raycast and Raycaseal. But for a solo class, it's fantastic, and if you don't have a force in your party, it's still a really, really solid choice as well. Don't let that dissuade you from playing a RAmarl in multiplayer because you are still a ranger, you are still going to be incredible support regardless. Ranger is incredibly good in PSO in all of its forms. But just know that if you are playing a RAmarl and there is a force in the party, that you are going to be outclassed by other rangers. So if there was a Raycast or a Raycaseal in the party, they're probably going to provide more use overall. So just be aware of that. To be honest though, it is hard to fault RAmarl because it is such a strong class to play. Just having the combination of the support that Ranger can give with weapons like Frozen Shooter and Spread Needle, combined with level 20 techs, combined with the increased firing speed on the Heaven Striker for Divine Punishment support, it just makes RAmarl incredible overall. And it's definitely, in my opinion, it's definitely one of the strongest classes in the game. If you view it from an average. So I hope that's been relatively useful. One last thing I'm just going to cover. I will maybe go back and add this in comments to the other guides that I've done as well. Some people have asked me for some section ID recommendations for the class. So for RAmarl, if you are wanting to hunt gear that a RAmarl can use, I would typically recommend any of the typical Ranger IDs. So that would be IDs like Purple Num. So Purple Num gets a lot of Mech Guns. It is a very, very strong Ranger ID. I would also recommend Greenhill. Greenhill, again, has a few pretty good range drops. I believe it's also the only ID that gets the Yasminkov 3000 as well. Purple Num being the only ID that gets the Yasminkov 9000. So if you do want to get these mech guns and you want to find them, not get them through Black Purple's deal, you will have to make a Purple Num for this. Now, other IDs you could go with, White Eel is always a really solid choice for basically any character. White Eel also has the advantage of being the only ID. I believe it's the only ID that can get Handgun Gold and Handgun Miller, which you can combine to make Gold Miller. So that's a fantastic choice for that. Just be aware that if you are going for those, both Handgun Gold and Handgun Miller are both incredibly rare drops, so you'd be very lucky to get them both. You'd be very lucky to get one, to be honest. So I would probably go towards either Purple Num or Green Eel as my first choices. There are a few others you could consider, so Blue Full has some reasonable drops for Ranger as well. White Eel is just a really solid drop ID overall. To be honest, even IDs like Scarlight, Scarlight actually has some pretty good range drops. It's obviously more focused towards Hunter, but there is definitely some decent range drops there as well. In regards to hunting for other characters though, because Ranger is such a good solo class and great for support, you can solo a lot of content very, very easily, which means you can hunt gear for other classes really, really easily with a Ranger. So, for example, if you're hunting something from Control Tower, for example, doing it with a Ranger is much easier than doing it with another class, just because you can just freeze the enemies, take them out while they're frozen. You don't have to worry about all the instant death that's in Control Tower. So I would definitely consider a Ranger class if you're wanting to hunt for another character. So, say you've got one character already and you need some gear that you can't get, and you need to make a new character to find that gear, I would probably go towards making a Ranger, just because you'll have an easier time overall. So I hope that's been relatively useful. Let me know as well if the sandbox stuff is actually helpful in the videos. It's really, really simple for me to do. I can do this going forward. Obviously, it won't be in there for the previous ones that I've already done, but I will recommend things still in the video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking or subscribing to the channel. We typically do 2 uploads a week, usually one midweek, one at the weekend. Usually one is for NGS and one will be for another Phantasy Star, which is usually PSO. We also stream once a week on Sundays as well here on YouTube, and that's normally a mixture of PSO and other content as well. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is twitter.com/sectionskyline, and I'm always active on there as well. So I'll always post on there whenever I'm going live or whenever there's a new video going up. So just keep an eye on that as well. But hope you've enjoyed the video. Any questions, leave them below. I'll try and answer what I can. But for now, I'll see you guys in the next one.